Hello, my name is Naftali Picard, and I'm speaking to you from the central coast of California in October of 2017. And I want to discuss an issue really fast. I hope we can do this inside of 5 minutes about freedom of speech. And so here are some questions I want to pose. Are the NFL protests a matter of free speech? Will these protests that take place during the national anthem win the hearts and minds of Americans? And thirdly, are these protests helpful or hurtful for the sport? And I think it's really important that we divorce ourselves from emotions and be very logical. This is a very emotionally charged issue, and I'm asking that we be very calm and logical because, like I said, emotions are the enemy of logic. Is it a matter of free speech? From a constitutional point of view, no, it is not. Okay? Now, the Supreme Court has ruled many times with regard to free speech, and it's protected largely with government employees, right? I'm a government employee. But if you work for a private company, you don't have freedom of speech. And I would argue I don't have full freedom of speech as a government employee either. There are certain things that I could say that would get me fired. But especially in the private realm, the NFL is a private company. So does Colin Kaepernick have the right to lodge protests and say what he wishes? Well, you know, the company NFL could actually fire him, and this is a workplace issue, is what I'm saying. So it's not protected constitutional speech. Now, is it free speech in the loose sense that we Americans believe in the free flow of ideas? Let's look at that. So we're not really sure what these NFL players are protesting. Some say the police, some say police brutality, some say homelessness. They say a lot of things. It's very vague and very disorienting. But at any rate, so the NFL has fined players for dancing at the end zone, right? The NFL has forbidden players for 9/11 tributes, right? The Dallas Cowboys had an issue in 2016. As you recall, Black Lives Matter staged a protest against the police in Dallas, and they shouted, "How do we want our cops dead when we want them now?" And so then they shot 5 police officers, and 4 white, 1 Hispanic. And the Dallas Cowboys wanted to put a little emblem on their helmet to honor those fallen police officers. And the NFL told them under no uncertain terms, you will not honor those, you will not put a decal on your helmet, okay? And there's an issue recently about custom cleats that someone recently told me about. So if we're talking about the free flow of ideas loosely, not constitutionally, how could it be that Colin Kaepernick has the right to go to practice, this is a workplace issue, and wear cops are pig socks, right? And that's okay, but you can't tribute 9/11, you can't tribute fallen cops. The NFL, what it's done is actually sided with leftist causes and not with conservative causes. This is not a good business model, right? You want to stay neutral if you're selling a product, and they are selling a product, they're selling entertainment, they're selling tickets, okay? So there's a big inconsistency about the free flow of ideas. If it looks like it's a traditional idea, they forbid it. But if it's a progressive idea, they seem to support it. Will these protests that take place during the national anthem win the hearts and minds of Americans? Apparently not. Now, 2-3 weeks ago, the ticket sales were down about 17%. Now they're down 20%. Depends on the market and the weekend, of course. There is some fluctuation. Ticket sales are going way down, right? I'm a public school teacher. I have students whose parents are in law enforcement of different races. And they've come to me and said, you don't realize, Mr. Picard, how hurtful it is that my dad is in law enforcement and Kaepernick has "cops are pigs" on his socks, okay? This is not freedom of expression, this is rude and it's evil, okay? Now, if someone said to me, but Mr. Picard, he didn't say all cops are pigs, maybe he meant some cops. This is how you test this, to see if it sounds racist or discriminatory. Plug the word black or transgender in there. If you were to say blacks are pigs, is that racist? Of course it is. If you were to say transgender people are pigs, is that discriminatory? Of course it is. So it's discriminatory to say cops are pigs and wear those socks, right? NFL is taking a position. Now, people are leaving these stadiums. They're leaving crying. There are Gold Star families who lost people in foreign wars, and they've been handed flags and the national anthem at funerals, and they don't want to sit there and cry their eyes out while certain people, football players, refuse to stand during the national anthem. Now, I support protesting and freedom of speech. Completely, I'm a free speech advocate, hardcore. But there's a place to do that. Do we want Colin Kaepernick to express his views? Certainly. Do we want the Seattle Seahawks, those 6? Certainly we do. But the question is, where do you do it? You don't do it at work, and you don't do it when people pay tickets to watch a football game. It ruins the game, okay? Let's look at this. Are these protests helpful or hurtful for the sport? Obviously now, when you bring up football, you can't avoid this topic. Now, when I grew up, we went to baseball games. Tiger Stadium, I'm from Detroit, Michigan. And I have fond memories of my dad and my uncles and so forth, buying the hot dogs and the sodas and beers if you were over 21 or 19 then. And you didn't care who's a Democrat, who's a Republican, who likes police, who hates police, what your race was. Baseball was just this incredibly unifying force, sports was. And now fast forward to 2017, and instead of uniting Americans under this great entertainment thing, now you have to decide, do you want to go there if you're a Gold Star family and cry your eyes out because they're disrespecting the flag? Or shall I say, using the national anthem to stage the protest at that very moment and not after the game? Do you want to buy a ticket if you have family that's in law enforcement and they're disrespecting police? No, and then what it does is bifurcates people. Now you have people, this one's the Republican, this one's Democrat. Football wasn't meant to do this, right? And so they're destroying the sport, and people are filling up baseball stadiums. People are voting with their feet. So this is what I think. It's not constitutional, constitutionally protected free speech. If it's free speech in the loose way, the NFL is grossly inconsistent, right? It's taken one political side. This is not a good business model. Are these going to win the hearts and minds of Americans? No. I mean, I get a stomachache thinking about NFL and football at this point, right? Do I want to go to a football game if a student of mine is playing? Yes, I do. I'm going to go to a basketball game soon. A student of mine invited me. So that's great. Am I going to go to an NFL game? Right? It's too divisive. I don't want to have politics forced into my face when I'm going to a football game. And I think that's the general trend in America. Are these protests helpful or hurtful? We are seeing the decline of football. Now, when I grew up, baseball was America's sport. Baseball, apple pie, and Chevrolet. And somehow in my lifetime, it switched to football. And what football did with the media and patriotism and the football players running out there with the American flag is they appealed to traditional Americans and traditional values, right? And we switched to football as the American sport. And now the ringleaders in the NFL have turned their backs on traditional Americans and told them, unless, we have to watch these protests, right? So I don't know that football will ever recover from this. I think that baseball will be the benefactor of this, and also basketball, if the ringleaders in the NBA are successful in enforcing their rules of being apolitical. So what is my point here? Is that sports ought to be neutral. It ought to be free of all politics. It ought to be neutral. And sports needs to be unifying. It needs to unify people, right? To the extent that sports divides Americans and turns us against each other, it's not going to work. And that's my opinion. That's what I think. And please leave your comments below.